So it's about a month now that we have embarked upon a long journey of 38 different aspects of Buddhist virtues or character qualities which are found in the Mangala Sutta, which characterize a sort of stairway moving from the simple and the evident characteristics to cultivate and moving towards the more esoteric ones. And what we've been doing is looking at these half a blessing a week, sometimes on a Thursday, sometimes on a Tuesday, depending on when they have me to give a talk. And the last time we looked at the tail end of not associating with fools, and most people always insist that they like to have the bad news before the good news, and I think as a result of most of that bad news, then not many people came on Tuesday. But yes, now we get on to the nice stuff. So the ones who are still here get to listen to the nice aspects, which today involves associating with the wise. And in the half that I will talk about today, we're talking mostly about the telltale signs of a wise person in order that we can spot them and make the attempt to associate with them more closely in the hope that some of their wisdom will brush off on us. This is not to say that you're not already wise people, but in case there's any room for improvement, then you can have that wisdom brush off on you from those people who you can identify. Next time I will talk a little bit more about the quality of a wise person's friendship and the actual mechanism of association with them. So, we have already seen how important it is, especially when we are new to the game, of the sort of people who we are close to, because a lot of their ideas, their assumptions, their view of the world, and their idea of normality tends to brush off on us simply by the fact that we associate with them regularly. So if we were able to identify those who have wisdom and a positive effect on those around them, then we can take a major shortcut in our spiritual cultivation by being close to such people. The problem is with finding out in advance who such people are in order that we don't pick up the wrong sort of habits. And the first thing I would like to point out is that although we might assume that wise people are well-educated people, that is not necessarily the case. Because what it really characterizes those who are wise, as we shall see in more detail in a few moments, is really what they perceive as being profit in life. So their conception of what profit is like in life tends to be what makes them wise rather than someone who is otherwise undistinguished. So we've already seen that fools from our last blessing, blessing number 1, tend to have not a very advanced idea of what is profit in life. It's mostly a rather short-term view of what profit in life might entail. Also, as I've said, it's not to do with being educated, although education can count. But education is something that we will come back to more in blessing number 7. So we'll deal with that a little bit further down the line. The Pali word for the wise one is actually the word pandita, or what in English would be called pandit. So it's a sort of borrowed word from Indian language. But what we might understand by pandit doesn't actually help us very much here, because generally we think of it as people who give commentaries on the sports channel and that sort of thing. So that's not actually who we're looking for in terms of a wise person. And really, to make the distinction between having a lot of knowledge and having the right sort of knowledge, we need to distinguish between three levels of knowledge, which are described in Buddhism. Though the sort of knowledge which is theoretical or hands-on knowledge. So theoretical knowledge might be the sort of thing you get in school. Hands-on knowledge might be the sort of knowledge where you take what you learned in school and put it into practice in order to generate benefit for society or in order to earn a living. But the knowledge which is special to the wise ones is something known as insight knowledge, which tends to come not from being schooled, but rather from having a still mind and a mind that can reflect deeply until realizing the real truths of life. So it's this insight knowledge which is really the distinguishing feature of wise people. But saying that, there are actually several levels on which you can define a wise person, if you happen to be looking for one, or if you happen to be looking for the qualities of yourself, which might already be wise. And I'm going to talk about 4 different levels on which you can describe a wise person. Firstly is by looking at their habitual behaviors. Secondly, by looking at their conception of profit in life. Thirdly, by their virtues. And fourthly, by their quality of mind or their discretion. So let's look at the habitual behaviors first of all. So unlike the fool, the wise people tend to have thought that is characterized by loving kindness in place of hatred, generosity in place of greed, and a right view in place of delusion. When they speak to people, they tend to speak in a good way, which means that they are well-spoken, in contrast to fools who tend to just insult people. So they don't tell lies, they don't use divisive speech, they tend to avoid harsh words like swearing, and they avoid idle chatter. And lastly, even in the things that they do, the wise people will habitually be compassionate, earn an honest living, and be fairly faithful on the marital front. If you were to look at the quality of a person's mind that underlies those sort of habits, then we would be able to say that people generally, as we look around us in society, are in 3 different categories. Those who are fools are those whose mind is usually rather clouded. Those who are wise are those whose mind is habitually clear. But in between, you have a lot of people in the grey area who have ups and downs in the quality of their mind from day to day, or even during different parts of the day. So sometimes people like that, so basically ourselves, in the middle, in the grey area in the middle. We're not sort of full-on fools, we're not yet wise, but we're somewhere in between, but we are well-meaning. Sometimes these are referred to in Buddhism as Kalyana, Pala, or beautiful fools, or well-intentioned fools, because we're working on improving ourselves. Sometimes they are known in Buddhism by another word, which is putuchana, which means thick people, literally, but it refers more to having rather a thick rind of defilements on them. So not so thick as in like unresponsive, but a work in progress, you might say. And because we are working to get rid of this rather thick covering of defilements, greed, hatred, and delusion in our mind, because we have not completely blocked out the voice of reason yet, we are sometimes known as Kalyana Putuchon, or well-intentioned people with a thick rind on. And we hope that through a fair amount of scrubbing that we'll be able to get through to the real us underneath. So the first step for us as people with that rind that needs to be got rid of is to recognize wisdom, if not yet in ourselves, then at least in the people around us, so that some of that can brush off. In terms of virtues, the wise are sometimes distinguished in terms of 4 qualities. And I raise these because sometimes they're a little bit more visible to us than simply trying to guess what's going on in a person's mind. And these qualities are gratitude. So if you help a person and they appreciate it or pay it back, then generally that's a good sign. If they work to purify themselves, then that is a good sign. If they encourage people around them to purify themselves, so I'm talking mostly in terms of ethical nature, and that's a good sign. And last but not least, they behave in an endearing way. Yeah, 4 qualities. If that's not clear, then we can make another way of looking at wise people is the way they define profit in life. And the word profit generally makes you think of financial profit, and you might not be entirely wrong, because at the very heart of practice for profit in life comes an idea of profit in the here and now. But I should add that it's also profit in the hereafter. So profit in the here and now is not the whole story, but I will talk about it as being a sign of someone who is wise. It's someone who is at least setting themselves up properly in the here and now. And sometimes in this respect there is something known as the Dhammakaya International, or what's known as the the 4 chambers of the millionaire's heart. Hearts have got 4 chambers, and also this little diagram here has got 4 chambers to it. It's said that in order to set yourself up in life, even financially speaking, so that you're not going to be a burden on other people, then you need to have 4 qualities. And these include working diligently in order to earn a living instead of sitting around all day waiting for welfare handouts, for example. Second quality is, once you have earned some money for yourself, then you look after it carefully. You don't let it get frittered away by lack of caution. So stolen or washed away by floods, or disappearing into Bitcoin or whatever. A third aspect is looking carefully at the sort of people you associate with, because if you tend to associate with people who are rather wasteful, then that can be a reason that all your hard-earned money disappears. So associating with good friends, it says there, but in fact the whole topic of today is associating with wise ones. In fact, it's the same thing. So good friends, wise ones, whatever you want to call them, if you associate with them, then it helps you to set yourself up in life, even in the here and now. And last but not least, spending within one's means, or not living beyond your means. There's sometimes a subject called Buddhist economics, which is for another day, but basically it talks about the economics of what's left over. So if you don't spend more than you earn, then you have something left over, right? A pretty simple logic. And even if you are very rich, but you spend more than you earn, you end up with debts. So being rich doesn't necessarily mean you don't have debts. It depends on how much of what you've earned you spend. And having some leftover generally is a good thing. So living within your means is generally seen to be a way of bringing a sense of security in life, in this present lifetime anyway. And the Buddha often said that being in debt is a form of suffering. So avoiding debt is smart thinking. But that's not the whole story. Most people who are truly wise don't just think about the here and now. And I should say that diligent acquisition means earning in a wholesome way and in a way that doesn't cut corners. So even if you're a businessman, you have to be ethical in your business practices. But the wise one looks beyond that to elaborate it further into profit for the hereafter. And the logic behind this, also known as Sampiraya Kata Payochana, is that there are some qualities of mind that are worth investing in, even in the here and now, because they stay with you into the hereafter. Or they can ensure happiness in the hereafter. And these are not really things that you are material assets, but they are more like character qualities which stay with you even as you leave this world. And there are 4 of these again. Faith or confidence, also known as sattha, means the faith that doing good things will lead to good outcomes for oneself. Keeping the precepts is seen as a good investment for the hereafter because it indicates the level of your humanity, not taking advantage of those who are weaker than you. The third one is generosity or chaka. Just as we have relied on the generosity of others since early in our lives, we would not be here if we'd been abandoned at birth. Then we should try to give back to others in the same way. And last but not least, wisdom. The wise one, after all, values wisdom. It's said to be something that we can gradually collect up. If we study hard, meditate regularly, then we start to fill our mind with knowledge that is accurate about the world rather than hearsay. For the fool who we met last time round, then profit in life is probably much simpler than all of that. It's mostly to do with short-term profits, nothing to do with the spiritual side. And one last way of looking at a wise person is trying to see how they look at the world. If you ask the real difference, which gives rise to the different habits, the different virtues, the different definition or perception of what they consider to be profit in life, then it all comes down to how they see the world. And the real difference underlying all of that is the way their mind works. The mind of a fool tends to be rather clouded compared with the mind of a wise person. A wise person doesn't have any special vision. All they have is clear sight, clear understanding of what is actually happening in the world around them. Instead of having rather a vague notion of what's going on in the world, they see things as it really is. So seeing clearly, they're able to distinguish between what is going to be benefit or harmful in life. Whereas for the fool, that might be rather a vague distinction. So there are some things which characterize the wise person, 5 in fact, which we can look at. And the first of these is that they tend to like to shepherd the people around them in a beneficial way. So they tend to encourage people in a good and a beneficial or a wholesome path in life. Unlike the fool who tends to set people on a rather destructive path. And there's a story to go with this, which is of a naughty monk and a prince who fell under his sway. There may be names that you've heard of. The naughty monk was called Devadatta. The prince was called Ajatasattu. You can see them in the picture. And because the monk was naughty and probably would have better been talked about last week, he was a monk who was jealous of the Buddha. He didn't really accept the Buddha as he saw all the respect that everyone showed the Buddha, and he wanted some of that for himself. He didn't think about how the Buddha earned that respect. But what he thought to himself is that if I get to be more influential, then people will come to me instead of the Buddha, and I will feel important. And at that point, he had some mental powers which he had built up for himself. What he was able to do might be called in the present day shape-shifting, and he was able to alter his appearance to change into the appearance of a child and then change back again into his monk-like self, which is pretty impressive if you've never seen it before. But in terms of like miracles, on a scale of miracles, it's like pretty much just a parlor trick in terms of meditational attainments. But he did this in front of this prince, Ajatasattu, who he was trying to influence, trying to groom. And he knew that Ajatasattu wanted to replace his father on the throne. His father was called King Bimbisara. And in fact, King Bimbisara was not at all attached to being king. When he heard his son wanted to replace him on the throne, he said, "Go for it. It's time for my retirement anyway." But Ajatasattu still felt suspicious that someone would come and try to steal his power from him. So when he asked advice from Devadatta, Devadatta said, as long as your father's still alive, then he's always going to be a threat to you. So what did he do? He locked his father up in a cell. But then he learned that people still liked his father and would go and see him in the prison cell. So he asked Devadatta, "What should I do about this?" And Devadatta said, "Well, as long as he's alive, then he's going to be a threat to you." So he stopped sending food to the prison cell until eventually, to cut a long story short, King Bimbisara died of starvation. And Ajatasattu was happy because he could now be king without having to look over his shoulder. But much later on, his own child was born, his first son, and he realized a great and strong feeling of love for his own child. At which point he suddenly realized what his father must have thought about him when he was born, and he felt terrible guilt. And of course the dirty deed was done by then, and he went to see the Buddha instead, who gave him a lot of teachings which set him on the right path, Buddha being a wise one. But it was too late to make amends for all the damage that had been done. So the karma had been created, and it is also heavy karma. If you know about the categorization of karma, killing a parent is pretty heavy karma. So that karma would come to him not sooner than later. So this is one example of not being shepherded in a wise way by Devadatta, but coming to a wise one later on, it would have been much better the other way around. So shepherding others in a proper way, this is one of the signs of a wise one. Second one is they tend to take full responsibility for things that are their own business, rather than interfering in things that are not their own business. tend to favor things that are honest and decent, instead of being proud of the fact they can get away with anything in the race to the bottom. Fourthly, they're not easily angered, but beware of the people who just go around in a sort of daze, in an inert sort of mode, doing everything in sort of slow motion. They don't seem to be very angry, but it may not mean that they are a wise person. They might just be strung out. Okay. And last but not least, they tend to favor things which are in accordance with self-discipline, so keeping the precepts, and orderliness generally. People who tend to think of themselves as being above the law tend to end up as sociopaths. So, as we shall see, we shall look a little bit more next time about how to, once we have identified people who are wise, or who have elements of wisdom in them, how we can best associate with them and the sort of friendship which those wise people give to those around them. For today, I will just finish by saying that we have in-person classes here every Tuesday between 7 and 8:30. The meditation is a little bit shorter than it was tonight, and of course Thursday evenings. Apart from that, every Saturday, if you are more of an online sort of person, between 7 and 8 on British time, we have a meditation and a short Dhamma talk, which you can join in with all the others from around Europe. Coming up on the 21st of October, we have also an online Zoom meeting, but it's also held in person here, as it happens to be on a Thursday. So we have a candle lighting again. It seemed to be quite popular last time we held that, and the theme will be the end of Buddhist Lent. And I should say that on the 24th there's also a big ceremony here for robe offering, which takes place all day. It's the sort of thing you can bring your family to as well. After last year, when we were only allowed to have 30 people attending, it will be a lot more fun this year. Yes, with at least 15 food outlets. Yes. Back up to full strength again, at least on the food side. And for those of you who like to meditate in your daily life, maybe you don't want to be connected to the internet the whole of the time, there's also an app known as MindGem, which you can download for free, and there are lots of tracks of meditation from various monks in English, and talks about meditation and its benefits on there, which you can help yourself to many hours worth. It also has a meditation timer on it to encourage you to meditate up to the length of time that you have set for yourself on any particular day. But for those who are new to meditation, I would encourage you to meditate at least 20 minutes a day, if you can do so. Yes, indeed. So for today, I would draw it to a close there, while saying that if anyone has any questions, comments, or feedback, this would be a good time to share that. I think the context for this whole dichotomy between the fool and the wise is talking about people pretty much just starting out as a blank slate, where whatever is the first influence on them when they are very easily led, as it were, when they're still finding their own feet on this pathway of spiritual transformation, is that whoever they are close to first has a big influence on their future direction. So this is talking mostly about people who have not got that ego yet. They have not got anything. They are sort of a blank slate. And this is especially relevant to children or vulnerable people. And we all start out vulnerable. As we've grown older, whoever has been the influences in our past, we don't know. Hopefully we've been lucky. Then we have a harder shell on us, and we can be a little bit more discriminating for ourselves. Nonetheless, we still need to watch out for those other people, because some of them are so manipulative that even a person who's quite intelligent and confident can be misled by such sort of tricksters and con men, whatever. So we can't afford to just say, oh, well, we've done that. We can tick it off the list because it's always there. As for precepts and so on, they are something we work at, but they're also a way of clearly seeing where the habits of people lie. And if you want to get more advanced, then you can take all of this and you can turn it around and look at yourself with it as a mirror to see how you measure up. Would you be the sort of person who would be considered a wise one by other people yet? Do you have all these qualities? And if not, then there's homework even there to be done, because it's not just about how we choose other people to associate with, but how are we as an influence on other people. We could turn it around and look at ourselves in that same way, at which point it becomes quite a challenging teaching, because we're not quite up to the point there. Maybe we're a little bit more on the wise side than the foolish side, but there's still some way to go, in which case we know where to fill the gaps now, having looked at the characteristics. I think the thing about this fool-wise person dichotomy is we're not talking about people being slow to learn from their mistakes. The problem of the fool, who we've done them last week, is that even though they know it's a mistake, they still do it anyway. And this is a particularly destructive sort of person to associate with. So if we are ready to learn from our mistakes, that's good. We've already put ourselves out of the danger zone. We're in the sort of middle grey section now where we can start to sort of turn towards something better. But the real difficult thing about the fools is that they're almost proud of the fact that they're not learning from their mistakes, which is a very destructive sort of person to be close to. Because even if we have this inclination to learn from our mistakes, we lose it once we get close to that sort of people. So that's why we need to insulate ourselves against their sort of way of thinking. It may not, I wouldn't like to put a percentage on it, but it's probably not a very big percentage, but you better hope it's not those sort of people who are all your best friends. Yeah, Eva. Oh, it's not determined, but what this is saying is that you have some choice in the matter. But you need to know what you're looking for. So this is what we are learning here. It may seem very sort of basic to you, but for some people, it is. If it's not obvious to them, then it could be very dangerous. I was listening to a documentary today, and we tend to like to give everyone a fair chance. But if you like parachuting, and you're having someone else pack your parachute, wouldn't you be very careful about the person who you would trust to do that? And we're talking about the sort of person who's packing your parachute. So we all like to give everyone a good chance, but maybe the parachute, I'll be a little bit more choosy here. So who's the one packing your spiritual parachute? Yeah, when you can't do it for yourself yet. Yeah, later on you can pack it for yourself. So next time we will look a little bit more about the qualities of friendship of the wise persons and how best to learn from them. Yeah, and that will be next Tuesday. Yes. Hopefully all the people who got put off by the fools will come back by then. all of you enjoy happiness, prosperity, fulfillment in life, be able to recognize the wise ones in your midst, and also to discover the wise one within yourself with ease.